Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our course breakdown for our second event of the 2024 season, the Sony Open at Waialae Country Club, one of the longest standing golf courses that we've had at any event over the entire schedule, and one we have plenty of data on. We kind of know what to expect around this kind of venue, and here in this video, going to make sure you have all the info you need, whether you're playing DFS, outrights, all of that, to go out there and make your educated betting choices. We'll go through some of the course characteristics, some of the trends that we've noticed around Waialae over the past 3 or 4 seasons, a little hole-by-hole breakdown, some key stats, some custom modeling notes, and make sure you have all the info to get ready for your process. A lot to get into. It's a full field event. The analysis will go even further on a week like that. Let's go ahead and hop on in. First off, with some of our course details around Waialae Country Club. A new partnership we have here in 2024 is with Bet the Number, an up-and-coming golf database that launched just a few days ago here in January of this year, and maybe the most advanced in all of the industry. And this thing just launched, right? So I can't even imagine what they'll have here in the future. But for these course breakdown videos, is going to provide a lot of valuable information for us and give us an easier way to go through some of the course characteristics than maybe what we had there in the past. So looking forward to that partnership. Going to be extremely useful, whether you're doing DFS, course analysis, or outright betting, and going to be a key fixture in some of these videos here in 2024. So first off, we've got the course breakdown page up here, which is a nice summary of what to expect around Waialae. So I've got it selected for 2023, so just the stats from last year, and you can see they make it real easy to compare to your tour averages. So it's a par 70, it's just over 7,000 yards, so on the shorter end of the spectrum in a Seth Rayner design. And if you're talking about just, what to expect from Waialae, it's much more typical of your PGA Tour average course than what we had at Kapalua, right? Kapalua had elevation changes on every single hole. You also had a lot of slope, right? Whether it was in fairways or on the greens around that golf course. Waialae is almost completely flat. You've got water hazards in play, unlike there at Kapalua. You've got tree-lined fairways, and you also have your regular kind of green setup, right? You're not going to have a lot of natural areas around the green. There's a lot of bunkers, a lot of little fairway areas that you'll have to chip off of, and just much more typical of what we're used to seeing. So both from the field perspective, right, we have a full man field this time around, and from the course perspective, it's a lot more of a traditional week when it comes to PGA DFS. In terms of your, stat by stat breakdowns, your fairways are pretty hard to hit around Waialae. They're extremely narrow. They tend to have a lot of dog legs as well that make them hard to hold. So your fairway percentage, about 5% lower than your tour average there last year. Your green and regulation percentage, though, was actually higher than your tour average, right? A lot of times when we have a lower fairway rate, you'll see that translate to a slightly lower green rate, but because it's only a 7,000 yard golf course, I mean, you're hitting a lot of wedges regardless of where you're driving the ball, you're going to have to get a lot of greens and regulations. So that's worth noting. Some years this has been closer to 75, even like 77% when it comes to a green and regulation rate. And on those type of years, you've seen winners of like 23 or even better than that under par. Your scrambling rate is about the tour average. It's not too difficult, not too easy to get up and down around this track. Your birdies per round is slightly higher than your tour average, which of course makes sense even for a par 70 because of the relative lack of length. Your bogeys per round, slightly lower than average. It's about average in pretty much every single metric, right? So like I said, it's a very typical type of design. You've seen a lot of accuracy type of players find success here because of the lack of length. A lot of good putters, particularly on Bermuda grass, that have gotten the job done around Waialae Country Club. And in general, we kind of know what to expect, right? So if we look at the leaderboard last year, you'll see this is the top 10 over here, and almost everyone gained a bunch on approach, and almost all of them gained a bunch over here with the putter. And if you look at off the tee and around the green, you can see there are plenty of losers mixed into that mix. You can see a few losers with the putter over here. You can see, right, a Nate Lashley and Andrew Novak, for example, were not able to gain with the flat stick. But those are the severe outliers, right? All of this green over here, all the real big gainers, we're doing it with the approach and the putting, which is pretty typical, right? If we go back here to 2022, just show you a few different sample sizes. First off, you see the fairway rate was slightly higher back there 2 years ago. Your green and regulation rate was also just slightly higher. And the trends, though, are the exact same, right? Around the green doesn't look all that important at all. You're off the tee metrics. There's a few guys gaining. And Hideki, right, was out there gaining about about a stroke per round, but the putting and the approach play, right, is where you're seeing that dark green out there, right? Guys gaining a stroke and a half per round on approach, 2.3 strokes per round with the Lucas Glover, and then your top two finishers absolutely lit it up with the flat stick, which maybe isn't atypical, right? If you're going to win a PGA Tour event or get into contention, you're going to have that, putter to cooperate. But it makes sense when you look at some of the top fives and top tens too, right? Like Russell Henley, for example, who ended up getting passed by Hideki Matsuyama that year. Kisner, Seamus Power, right? All kind of known as solid Bermuda grass putters. And if we go back to 2021, you'll see that remain the case again. That's the year where we had Cam Smith. Actually, a year before that, 2020, is when we had Cam Smith winning the golf tournament. A lot of putting first type of players. I mean, look at this, 2020, 2 strokes per round gained with the flat stick. He actually lost strokes on approach and won that week, which is just kind of crazy to think about. But yeah, look at this. Brendan Steele in second, right? 1.6 strokes gained per round. And yeah, to go back to 2021 and show you, that's the year that Kevin Na ended up winning. Your fairway percentage, your green and regulation percentage haven't changed all that much. But the approach play and the putting is where you see all of that dark green. So when we get to the key stats later, you're going to see a lot of emphasis on wedges, especially from that 125 to 150 yard range. And then in terms of your putting, it's all about that Bermuda grass putting. So it's a flat course, one that is, again, very typical of what we get out here on the PGA Tour. Kind of similar to a Wyndham Championship with Sedgefield, Bermuda Championship, Port Royal, all these shorter, RBC Heritage are some classic type of golf courses where you don't have to be long to get there, right? Off the tee is not the end all be all. And it's really just about setting up birdie looks, which of course, like every golf course, every event is about setting up birdie looks and then cashing in on them. But this golf course, maybe even more so than most. To give you an idea of what to expect around Waialae, here's a little hole-by-hole breakdown over there on Pro Visualizer. And hole number 1 is one of the 2 par 5s that is converted to a par 4 this week. The members play this as a par 72. The PGA Tour players will be playing it as a par 70. So definitely keep that in mind with some of the distances here. They move up the tee box. This won't play 530. Last year played right around 485 yards. So rather than hitting drives that are the whole way back here, you're going to see them much closer to where I set this first target. So it's a shorter hole. It's not nearly as daunting as you might expect with this 530 number, but still a pretty hard hole to go out there and attack. Not the handshake that you'll see at quite a few tour venues, but one if you're making par on, you're probably going to feel happy about it. And just to give you an idea of the characteristics of these greens, like I mentioned, it's not nearly as wild as what we have at Kapalua. It's pretty typical around the green conditions with bunkers, fairway area to chip out of, and some trees you could get into if you hit a real errant shot, but you're not going to be out there in a ravine, that sort of thing, like you kind of had at Kapalua. Hole number 2 is 428. This you have a little water hazard down the left, but once again, you hit it in the fairway, most likely with something less than driver, and you're going to have a wedge in, right? Maybe a 9-iron at the very most if you decide to lay back a little bit, but small little green complex. These greens at Waialae are among some of the smallest that we have on tour. Not quite as small as like a Pebble Beach, not on that level of extreme, but still much smaller than what you're used to seeing. Hole number 3 is 419 yards. You have that same water hazard down the left side, and it's almost a carbon copy of hole number 2. So you're going to see a lot of holes out here that are around a 3-wood, maybe even a driving iron off the tee. If you decide to hit driver, right, people will bail out to the right quite a bit here to try and avoid the aquatic hazard. But it's very simple, almost cookie cutter type of holes, right? Driver, maybe a 3-iron off the tee, and then hit a wedge in. Hole 4 is your first par 3. It's 205 yards. So it's not on the shorter end of the spectrum, but this green is much larger than the rest on property. So anytime you're going to have a long iron in, some of your par 5s will fit this description too. You're going to have a larger green complex. So they kind of compensate for that, give you a little bit of leeway, right, with the more green there. So you're not going out there and just having around the green shots all day. Hole 5 is 466. This one's pretty flat, has a little gunch in front, but unless you're a resort guest or a country club member here, you're probably not worrying about that hazard. Hole 6 is 469. Again, almost a carbon copy of hole number 5. It's a driver, maybe a mid-iron in. Hole 7 is 170, so your second par 3. This one's pretty narrow, but that's because it's a shorter hole, right? It's not 200 yards like you had for the first par 3. And some pin locations, especially if they tuck them just over these bunkers, could get a little bit tricky, but it's still, an 8, maybe even a 7-iron in here. Hole 8 is 460, another one of these cookie cutter par 4s. This one does slightly dogleg from right to left, but not all that severe. So again, another driver, maybe a mid-iron in, and another scoreable look. Hole 9 is your first par 5. This is a really short par 5, one that guys should be able to reach into. And the green complex is pretty large as well. You can see it's about the regular size of greens around here. It's not quite like that 205-yard par 3. But if you get it up there near the surface, should be able to get up and down for a birdie look. And you will see quite a few eagles at hole 9 as well. Hole 10 is 350. This is a potentially drivable par 4. A lot of that will depend on the wind direction, as well as if they decide to move up the tee box. So a lot of players, though, still going to choose to lay back, probably hit a driving iron off this tee. You will see some of the longer hitters, like maybe an Aberg this week, try and take it up near the surface. But there's a little ridge in the middle of the screen. You can kind of see it on this overhead view. Actually, right where the pin marker is about a 5% slope. And it makes those back pins actually a little difficult. And the front pins, easier to access with a wedge shot. You can spin it off the slope, get it relatively close to those pins, and kind of depends on the pin location there. Could be a birdie look and could be a little bit difficult with some of the back pins. Some of the back pins, the reason why it's difficult, I'll say, is over the back it drops off quite a bit, and because of that slope there, a lot of people are chipping up, they'll come back down the slope and have a hard time two-putting. If they're a little bit too aggressive with their chip, they'll go over the back, then it's a really tough up and down. You see a lot more bogeys at hole 10 than you might expect. Hole 11 is your next par 3. It's your third on site. This one plays directly into the prevailing wind. So on days where it's a little bit windier and we're getting those typical wind directions, this one could be a little bit harder. Hole 12 is 435. It's directly downwind on days when you have the prevailing wind, and is another wedge hole. Hole 13 is a converted par 4, so it won't play to this 500-yard mark. They use this tee box on the other side of the river here, or creek, whatever you want to call that, and you can take it over this bunker on the right. So the off-the-tee look is much different than if they were playing it from the tips. It's a little hard to hold the fairway because of how narrow it is over here, but it's another harder par 4 that isn't nearly as daunting as it looks on paper. Hole 14 is 438, going straight downwind once again. This is one of the harder doglegs on property with the right to left nature. So a hard fairway to hit. A lot of people will hit 3-wood to the corner, but even if you do that, it's a pitching wedge in, right? Maybe even a degreed wedge for the longer hitters. Hole 15 is 394, another 3-wood wedge type of hole. Hole 16 is 441. You might hit a driver here because you can bomb it over the corner, but if you want to be more conservative, a lot of people hit 3-wood to the corner. And the reason for that is these trees to the left might not look all that nasty, but in reality, it is much denser over here to the left than you might realize here from the overhead view. In any shot you miss behind this big, I think it's magnolia tree, I'm not sure, well, I'm not a big tree expert, but it's a big broad tree that they have on the corner here at 16. It's almost a for sure chip out, right? You might be able to hit a low runner around the corner and leave yourself like a 80-60 yard chip, something like that, but you're not going to go for the green from that kind of lie. Hole 17 is 191. This is also relatively exposed to the wind here, kind of like the other par 3, right? We have come in this direction, but doesn't play directly into the wind. So at least has that going for it. And then finally, hole 18 is your finishing par 5. You're either going to hit a 3-wood to the corner. You'll see a lot of people doing that. Hideki, when he hit his miraculous 3-wood into the green, actually laid up to the corner with a 3-wood before that. Siwoo Kim last year ended up in this bunker with a 3-wood. And still was able to make it to the green. So it's only 551. If you hit a driver over this bunker and somehow hold the fairway, you might have less than 190 yards in. And definitely you're going to see a few eagles there at hole number 18, but probably the easiest birdie look that you're going to have of your entire round. And now for our key stats of the week, which bet the number is going to be a huge help here in 2024 with some of the advanced filters that they have over there on their site. So we've got the custom model page up here. And what I want to point out are some of these advanced stat categories, right? So like around the green on Bermuda grass, not all the databases out there will give you that info. You've got left rough tendency, right? How much players miss to the left, which is of course helpful for some of those back 9 holes that dogleg from right to left. I think there's like 5 or 6 doglegs on the golf course and all but one of them, right, goes from right to left. You've got approach on small greens, so we can filter by some of the courses with smaller targets to worry about. You've got approach from custom distances on here, right? So we've got 85 to 175 on there, which of course is where almost all the iron shots will be from this week. You got approach from the rough you can go on there. It's just super helpful and pretty much unlimited possibilities that you can choose from on there, which again, just going to make my life easier and make my workload a lot less, because in the past, when databases didn't have this around the green number, I had to do all of that in-house, right? I had to set flags on golf courses, import data from specific golf tournaments to try and get a player's around the green metrics right. So hats off, tip of the hat out there to Bet the Number out there for making our lives a little bit easier. So with that being said, what key metrics am I using this week, right? So on here, we have some of the metrics that Bet the Number are looking at. Well, first off, I love this approach bucket over here, right? So from 85 to 175, we have this sorted by approach play out of the fairway, which if you're going to contend this week, right, you're going to miss some fairways. They're real narrow out there, but you're going to be playing from the fairway more often than not. So you want to be accurate off the tee. And if we're looking at players that have, succeeded from that range, we've got Lucas Glover on there, Alexander Bjork, who I'm sure we'll talk about at some point this week, a DP World Tour standout. That's an absolute stud. You got Ryan Moore standing out in that category. Eric Cole, after his hot season, he's going to be a hot commodity in DFS this week. If we go over here to approach on small greens, I like looking at that too, right? Trying to take a look at golf courses with a similar type feel. You can see Russell Henley leads the field in that category. You got Svensson up there, Hideki Matsuyama, who's won here before. So interestingly enough, right, you have Hideki, who won here a few years ago. You have Russell Henley, who's had an amazing track record here, has won here before and had that second place finish a few years ago. Dylan Wu, Carson Young have played decently here. Siwoo Kim, another winner, right? Really popping in that small greens category. These are the kind of things that you can filter on, over here on Bet the Number that you just can't find everywhere else. So I love that. I like that some of the winners are popping up in those two categories. If we're going to look at putting stats, you always want to look at Bermuda grass. It's real grainy Bermuda over there in Hawaii. We got Montgomery at the top of the list. You have, of course, Bermuda grass specialist Ben Griffin there. Tyler Duncan, Mav McNeely. Interesting to see Sahith pop up here, right there in the putting category. Andrew Putnam has been really solid on grainy Bermuda grass. You've got Alex Noren, Justin Rose, a lot of just typical names you'd expect to see at the top of a putting list. So if you're going to look at anything, right, kind of like those top fives, those winners we were looking at before, they're popping in the putting category. And I think a lot of these putters up here make a lot of sense, but they're also popping in these approach categories. So if we could find some crossover between the two, stat metrics is where you're going to find the hot spot. And the one that really sticks out to me, right, is Eric Cole right here, right? He's a really good gainer in Bermuda, right? 0.7 strokes per round. And then over here, he's also one of the top players from our approach ranges, right? If we do this by small greens, I'm sure Eric Cole will at least be at the top half of the list. Yeah, you can see right down here in probably like, 20th place when it comes to that category. So these are the types of players you want to be keeping an eye on. So you've got the approach numbers. If you're going to look at around the green metrics, there have been a few years where this course has played harder than expected, and around the green has come in quite handy. You can take a look at those guys on Bermuda grass. A lot of these top-end players don't have much of a sample to work with, right? Especially like Alejandro Tosti. So you might want to be a little bit careful with them. But look at that, Hideki, right? Past winner, is a specialist on hitting off of Bermuda grass. Aberg, right? Another small sample, but he's been really good around the green on Bermuda. Lingmerth, Sahith Thagala, another one who's popped in multiple categories, right? He's good on around the green on Bermuda, also putting on Bermuda grass. So that's interesting, especially for somebody that played college golf out west. For him to be that good on Bermuda grass is a little bit surprising. You got Luke List, right? Really good around the green on Bermuda. Not the best putter, though. So does check the around the green and the approach buckets, as we can see there, but maybe not the putting numbers. Steven Yeager, who played decently here last year, finished T28. Chris Kirk, right, your winner from the Century Tournament of Champions, pretty solid on Bermuda grass, both putting and around the green, and last year was also in contention, finished in third place. And just a lot of poppers we can look through. So if you're going to look at three key stats, I think around the green of Bermuda would probably come in at number 3. Number 2 would be your putting on Bermuda grass. And then the number 1 key stat I'm looking at, and pretty much is every single week, are going to be these approach numbers. And if you're going to filter by anything, look at the small greens, look at some of those wedges and mid irons, and I think you'll have a good go at it. And now for some comp courses, which also here on Bet the Number, we can take a look at some of the leaderboard crossovers. And what I'm going to look at first is the Wyndham Championship. So that would be Sedgefield Country Club, another shorter Bermuda grass track. And with the Wyndham Championship, you've had Siwoo Kim have a lot of success at both courses, a lot of crossover with guys like Russell Henley, for example. And if we take a look at some of these top 5 finishers, so we'll just sort this by 2023 first, you'll see a lot of approach play up here, right? Look at this, a lot of dark green on the approach play, and a ton of dark green over here with the putting. So it checks that box. We go back to 2022, right, just to give you a little bit of a larger sample size here. You'll see in 2022, it was the same story, right? A ton of green with the approach play, maybe a little bit less with the putting over there in 2021, but in terms of your approach distribution, it's almost identical across both golf courses. You go over here to 2021, you'll see the same kind of trends, a little bit more green in the putting category, but once again, almost all of your dark green is over here with the approach play. It's that kind of golf course, right? You got the same agronomy out there. It's a similar penalty off the tee if you're missing fairways, and a lot of crossover you can use there. So we got the Wyndham Championship. You could take a look at a few other courses like the RSM Classic. RBC Heritage also makes quite a bit of sense. Harbortown Golf Links, very similar lengthwise, similar setup-wise. You know, a lot of the same players that play well at the Heritage also play well at these other 2 golf courses. You know, Kevin Kisner, right, that short course specialist, wins top 5s at almost all of these events. And once again, it's a lot of green in the approach play like you'd expect to see, right? I mean, you're talking about golf tournament, right? You got to hit your irons well, you got to hit your putter well, but when everyone's doing that well, that's where you start to get some of that crossover. So you can look at the RBC Heritage. Let's see, let's find another short little track to use here. Pebble Beach Pro-Am, different agronomy wise, right? They have Poa Anua out there out west, but short, really small greens like we have here with Pebble. And if we sort this by only 2023, let's do that. You'll see a lot of green in the approach play, and then a lot of green, especially with your top 5 finishers with the flat stick. So if you're going to look at any course crossover, right, try and find those shorter tracks where you're having a lot of wedges. And if they have small greens, and if they have Bermuda grass, like what we have there at the Wyndham, those are just added little cherries on top. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the course breakdown this week. Hopefully you feel a little bit more prepared to get your research process started and can go out there and have yourself a week for the Sony Open. I appreciate the support here on the channel. If you guys enjoyed Bet the Number, make sure to check it out yourselves. If you use code Gsluke at checkout, you will get a little discount there, whether it's for a monthly or a yearly subscription. So check it out if that kind of analysis is up your alley. You want to go out there, build your own models with all those key stats, and go out there and find your own process. So it's a lot of fun. I'm excited to be partnered with Bet the Number this year, and the Sony Open, our first full field event of the year, is going to be an absolute firecracker. So down in the comments, let me know if you guys have a take on what the winning score is going to be. I'm personally going to take exactly -20. A lot of that will depend on the weather, but as of right now, without a forecast to work with, I'm just going to go ahead and take -20. But let me know your thoughts down below, whether you guys think maybe it plays slightly easier or maybe slightly harder this time around. And let's go out there and have ourselves a week. Smash that like button, subscribe if you guys haven't already, so you don't miss any of the content to come. We'll have DFS content dropping later on this evening. Of course, a live stream Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time, going through everything you need to know heading into this week. The usual for all of you guys out there. So excited to be back to golf, especially with the season ramping up here in 2024. Let's go out there and smash here for the second slate of the year.